Yes. Okay. Good morning. Welcome back to really our last meeting of Sociology 1. We'll have a meeting next Tuesday at 10 o'clock that I hope you can come to, and we'll review for the final at that meeting. But this is our last regularly scheduled presentation, as they call it. And so we're finishing up with our consideration of cities and the environment, the global environment together. And so that's the idea we're trying to get across here is that the daily life we live in our cities that we live in, and by the way, I didn't mention, but recently the world's population became more in cities than not in cities. In other words, throughout human history, most people haven't lived in cities. They've lived in the countryside, in villages, and cities where some people live. But now the cities have gotten so big, so many megalopolises around the world. Mexico City's one, by the way. I mean, Los Angeles is one, the Bay Area is one. China has growing cities, Europe as well. And so, so nowadays, if we look at the whole human population, a majority of people, more than 50% now live in cities. And our daily life in these cities, as we're trying to illustrate, affects our, the environment. And here in the United States, as we talked about, our carbon footprint, our per capita carbon footprint, is the highest in the world. So you and I, as individuals, we are contributing more than our fair share of carbon to the atmosphere. In other words, compared to Chinese people, we put out 3 times more than they do. And we're doing more than most other people. And rather than blame ourselves and say we're bad people, we're trying to see how structurally, in other words, how we've structured our daily life, explains why we have this carbon footprint. So we talked about that idea, carbon footprints, how much each of us contributes to global warming, and it's things like driving, and that's one of the main things. By the way, along these lines, the governor of California wants to force workers that work for the state of California to come back from home, working from home. People went home during COVID, and now the governor and other managers here in our district too, the management would like workers to come back to the workplace instead of working from home. But there's a bill now to try and allow people to work more from home, because again, it really reduces your carbon footprint. It would be good for our states. When the COVID did happen, the air got a lot better in California because fewer people were driving. And by the way, if you have a bunch of office buildings that don't really need to be used because everyone's working from home, those office buildings can become housing. And as we're going to learn as we talk about this, that's one of the big problems in California, is that the kind of housing we built and where is a big reason why we have the problems we do. So we talked about megalopolis being a city of cities, and that's how a lot of cities have become. They're not just one city, they've spread out horizontally to the point where they've gobbled up other cities. The way I like to put it is because I like to bake cookies. Anybody here bake cookies? If you're not careful when you bake cookies and you put your little balls of dough too close together on the cookie sheet, what happens? You end up with like one big cookie that nobody can eat because they all get stuck together. And in a way, that's what's happened in Los Angeles. All these little cities, 200 separate cities, were each trying to grow themselves, and they ended up all stuck together into one big cookie, city cookie, urban cookie that isn't easy to be part of. And so we're trying to understand that experience about LA and see how it compares to what's going on up here. So we talked about the reason it happened in LA, and I need to clarify because I didn't do a very good job of it. But it was this growth of suburbs, this idea that people want to not live in cities in big tall buildings, but want to live in their own house outside of the city with their own yard and all of that. And that's the American dream that a lot of us still seem to have. Although your generation, as we're now knowing, you might not ever be able to buy your own house. I mean, in California, the median price of houses now means that you have to be making like $400,000 a year to even buy a house. So And that's not where salaries are for most Californians. So this whole idea that we all get to have our own little house out in the suburbs, it was maybe attractive to a lot of people at one time, but it's clearly becoming hard to sustain. Um, and so we talk about, why did suburbanization happen? Why did people want to move out to the suburbs? Well, for one thing, economic reasons. The federal government pushed this idea. The federal government incentivized it. And here's what I forgot to leave out, I forgot to mention, were federal home loans. I did mention that the GI Bill. The GI Bill is one, but there were others that were the federal government saying, we want you to be able to buy a house, and we're going to give you a home loan at a cheap interest rate that you could never get from a bank, because we want to make it possible for you to put a down payment and start paying mortgage and, live in a house. And so the government wanted that. Why did they want it? As we talked about, this idea was, you're going to save capitalism by having more and more people with private property. Instead of just having a few top people own all the private property, let everybody have a little piece of the American pie. And if they're owning property, they're going to want to protect it, and they're not going to want to, go join some revolution to overthrow capitalism. And it was also the idea that if people own their own houses, they're going to buy stuff. And if you buy stuff, you can have a whole new economy that isn't based on war, when the government buys weapons, but a consumer economy where regular people buy stuff, and that's what keeps the economy going. And so instead of building weapons and bombs for war, the economy builds couches and, refrigerators and blinds and, outdoor furniture and the kind of stuff people want for their suburban homes. So it was a conscious effort by the federal government to grow home ownership, in part, as we talked about in this class, to grow the middle class. And a middle class would help stabilize capitalism and make it sustainable. But there were also cultural reasons. That was the idea that you can't just build the housing and make the home loans available. You have to try and persuade people that this new lifestyle is a better lifestyle, and that you want to do it, and that you don't want to live in a city. You want to go live in the suburbs. And so we mentioned all the TV shows and movies and other things that were, and magazines that were put out there to try and persuade people, you're not cool, you're not living your best life if you're not in your own home out in the suburbs somewhere. And so lots of people really around the world have been sold on this American dream that you really are making it in life when you own your own house and when you live on your own piece of land. But I do think your generation is starting to maybe rethink that and go, is owning what I really want? Because owning has a lot of other things. You have to pay for insurance, you have to pay for upkeep, there's all kinds of other responsibilities associated with ownership that aren't necessarily even good for you economically. I mean, if you rent and save money instead of buy and spend all your money on your house, you might end up later on more wealthy than if you had bought the house. But anyway, and so federal home loans were, and cultural reasons, this good life, this new definition of the good life. And then social reasons, this is what I didn't really break down the other day. We can separate out the social reason, this white flight idea of, white people leaving the cities and moving to the suburbs was another thing that happened to help create this whole new area of American life, the suburbs. And in LA, the suburbs are really symbolized by Orange County. Everything about Orange County, if you've been there, I mean, when it grew, it was, during this time, the post-World War II period, the 40s and 50s, it was a time when this virgin land, farmland, was getting torn up or, developed into housing. And that's the concern about sprawl, is if you turn all the land into housing and other development, you don't have nature. And if you don't have nature, you really have some bad environmental problems. And we're going to talk about some of the problems. And so Orange County also is famous for things that reflect suburban lifestyle, like Disneyland, this thing that's the celebration of TV and movie culture, and people, going out with their kids in their family car to this park, and the park also celebrated cars and all kinds of stuff. They used to have a ride, I don't know if they still do it, at Disneyland, when you're driving around in cars, and that's the fun of it. Anyway, so cars were a big reason if we're talking about the economic reasons. And here's where I should mention a little bit about Los Angeles. Well, we'll get to that point. So now Los Angeles, though, can't sprawl anymore. It's sprawled out. It started out in just LA County. And LA County is, near the LA River, which is a normal place for a city to be. You need water for cities. And so cities and cities generally grow up where, business is happening. In the old days, rivers are where goods were transported and all. So cities tended to grow up around rivers or coastal ports and things like that. But once it started growing in the 50s, it spread out into Orange County, into San Fernando Valley, Ventura County, and it really spread out into valleys. If you know about LA, LA has the valley, San Fernando Valley, and you may remember, maybe you guys are too young, but there used to be a whole thing called a valley girl and a valley guy, a whole way of talking that was associated with the valley, and there were movies about it and things like that. And so it was this, but other valleys, the San Marino Valley, the San Gabriel Valley, all kinds of valleys out there that the city has sprawled into, but now there's no more land. As we mentioned, the reason the sprawl happened is partly in LA especially, was because of developer-driven growth, this decentralized planning. That's what I mean by the cookies. Each city did its own, thing. And at first they were separate cookies, but now you have 200 separate cookies. And so developers were the ones that drove this kind of growth. It was developer driven, meaning they would want to buy virgin land. It's cheap, farmland, virgin. By virgin, I mean never been developed before. It could be just grassland or forest or wetland like swamps or desert. LA is mainly desert. It nowadays has like 10 million people or something like that. Is there enough water in the desert for 10 million people? No, so a big question is, why did LA grow so big and how if it doesn't have water? And so these developers, though, wanted to buy virgin land and develop it. And one of the places they bought a bunch of virgin land was San Fernando Valley. And at the time, San Fernando Valley, like I say, was basically desert. Now, why would rich developers buy a bunch of desert land? Well, they knew that water was coming. Where did the water come from to help LA grow so big? Up here. Comes from our area. It's our water, quote unquote. It's the Sacramento Delta is where the pipes are located. There's also the Owens Valley, the east of LA. There was water. And these rich developers were well-connected guys like Donald Trump. They know politicians, they know, newspaper owners, and they got this idea that if we can buy up all this desert land cheap, and we can bring water to the desert from other places, then we can build houses on it, and then it'll really become valuable. And when you build the houses on it and the golf courses and the parks, now you can sell that land for a lot more than you bought it for. And that's what they did. And some people call this so there's been movies about it. I forget, what's the name of it? Well, the Great Streetcar Scandal of Los Angeles. I'm mixing things up a little bit here, but I think it's called the Great Streetcar Scandal. You might have seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Anybody ever seen that movie? If you want to get extra credit for this class right now, I'll let you go watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit, or maybe you already saw it, and you can write up a little paper that talks about how did Who Framed Roger Rabbit fit with what we're talking about today. And another movie that's I don't want to recommend because it's pretty gross is Chinatown. But some people consider it the best movie ever made. And I guess I'll give you extra credit about that, but I want to warn you, it's got gross stuff in it about like incest and other stuff. And the guy who directed it, Roman Polanski, is himself wanted for child molestation here in the United States. So he lives in France and he won't ever come here. And So I'm not recommending you go pay money to see Chinatown, but if you can like steal it or pirate it, yeah, go ahead and watch it. But it's and it's a well done movie, but it's violent and it's gross. But it too tells the story of how LA happened. And it was about water. It's about water politics. So Chinatown was about water. If you go see another cartoon you could see that kind of tells the same story as Chinatown was Rango. Or anybody see that movie? About the lizard in the desert and the water and all of that. And that movie is a remake of Chinatown in a way as a cartoon about a lizard rather than a movie about a private detective. But anyway, so water coming to LA was the kind of crime in the sense that these rich guys saw a way to develop a whole area that probably shouldn't have been developed. And that they took water from one place and put it in another, and we still have the problems with water. And they didn't know about global warming. Well, what they did ended up contributing to global warming. So where's the Great Streetcar Scandal? Well, once you spread out LA, at first LA was a compact area in downtown LA County. And LA County is the oldest part of Los Angeles. It's where the city of LA is located. So like I showed you, that big sprawling area, just the tall buildings way off in the distance, that was downtown LA. That's where LA County is. But we were actually in that picture where that was situated was more like San Fernando Valley, more like Ventura County. Anyway, when it was just located in this small county of LA County, you had a lot of public transportation. And so people could get from all around LA, especially working people who couldn't afford their own vehicles, could get anywhere in LA they wanted to get through the streetcar system. You had what was called the red car in LA. And the red car was the name for the streetcars that allowed you to go all over LA without, your own car. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit tells the story of what actually did happen. But again, cartoons taking the place of real people. So it wasn't, who are the bad guys? I forget what kind of animal they are in Roger Rabbit. We'll have to watch it again. But in real life, it was a group of business people. It was tire companies, it was GM, General Motors, it was Dunlop Tires and Firestone Tires, I think, and American Petroleum, big oil company. They all got together and they bought the red car. They bought the entire public transportation system of Los Angeles. And then what did they do? They ripped it out and put all these red cars in storage and ripped out all the tracks. Why would a tire company, an oil company, and a car company rip out the tracks of the red car?
So you have to buy their stuff?
To incentivize you to buy cars. They made a very conscious choice to say, let's get rid of public transportation. Let's get rid of this idea everybody can just rely on each other to get around and make it a much more private thing of everybody have your own car and everybody just go where they want to go in their own car. It was a new model of freedom, this idea that, like I mentioned earlier, see the USA in your Chevrolet. It fit with this whole suburban model of you can live way outside of the city, but get in your big family vehicle and drive to the city if you want to, or go out camping somewhere. It was the new model of American freedom that went along with this American dream of the house, was the two-car garage too, having the cars in the house and having a Chevrolet. And so this whole new car culture is what developed. And again, we can look at it now in retrospect as a crime. Now, what they did was a crime. You can't collude as a company to get rid of your competition. In other words, these companies were all car companies, basically, or part of the auto industry. And what they did was come together, collude, to buy their competition and destroy it. And in the American capitalist system, that's not legal. And they were brought before the federal government. There was a big trial. And they were found guilty. And guess how much they were fined? 1 penny. Okay, a penny. So the government said, you guys broke the law. You shouldn't have colluded. That's not okay. But we kind of like what you did. you built the American auto industry, you built Chevrolet, and then now America from that time on, the 1940s on, America became the car capital of the world. Detroit was pumping out all kinds of cars, the world was buying these cars, American freedom was the envy of the world, people driving around in cars wherever they want to go. Like I mentioned, all kinds of songs and movies about cars. But in retrospect now, so at the time, it seemed like this great triumph of American capitalism. As we look back now, though, we say this dependency on cars and everybody driving everywhere is now a big problem. And the earth is heating up, and not only that, a lot of other problems related with too many cars, too many people are trying to get places in big combustion cars. And so, LA has sprawled out to the point where it can't sprawl anymore, but what problems does that cause? And so I just want to, I'm trying to not, what am I trying to do? I don't want to bore you with too much weeds of the lecture like I used to. I'm trying to focus on the things you need to know for the exam. And so what are some of the problems caused by urban sprawl? And not just by the sprawl, but by the fact that there's nowhere left to sprawl to. Here, I'm sorry, I have to get my notes back. I'm starting to ramble a little bit, and I want to make sure I'm kind of clear here. Let's see. Okay. Share my screen. Let's see. Okay, so changes. So now that LA is sprawled, it can't keep growing in the way it did. Like I said, it sprawled out very quickly, very rapidly, and now it can't sprawl anymore. So what do you have? Well, you have changing patterns. I'll just call it changing patterns of growth now in LA. One of the problems you have is population issues. California in general is facing population issues right now. LA used to be a place that was growing rapidly, like I said. Here's again where we can tie together chapters 19 and 20, because chapter 19 is about cities, but chapter 20 is about population and the environment. The natural increase, there's two ways that population grows. There's artificial increase, and there's natural increase. Basically, artificial increase is when people move into a place, and that's why it grows. And the people moving in outnumber the people dying. I mean, if there's more people dying than moving in, then the population doesn't grow, it goes down. But if the number of people being born in a place and the number of people coming into a place are growing, outpacing the number of people dying or moving, so it's called in-migration. In-migration to the place is the artificial increase. So LA, from about from the 1940s till about the 1980s, was experiencing a lot of artificial increase because people were coming from all over the country to enjoy this new suburban lifestyle in Southern California, where the weather's nice and there's palm trees and there's houses available. Nowadays, though, there's actually more out-migration than in-migration. More people are moving out of LA now than moving in. More people are moving out of California than moving in these days. And yet the population continues to grow. Why would that be? If the out-migration is higher than the in-migration, where is the growth coming from? Babies. So people are having babies, and they have a natural increase in population. But who are those people? So another thing we have to keep in mind is demographic change. Demography is the study of population. So when we talk about demography, we're talking about not just how many people, but what are they made up of? Like, what's the age breakdown of those people? What's the ethnic breakdown, like racial and ethnic background, gender background, breakdown? They talk about demographics in marketing a lot, like, who's our demo for this product? Meaning what population segment, what age, ethnic group, gender. So you've probably heard that term, what's our demo? And they're talking about demographics, and they're talking about, and so here, as LA's, when it was migration that was growing LA, in migration, it was mainly middle-class white people coming from in white flight, and LA became a very white place. Now, a lot of the out-migration is white people, and who are the babies being born? Well, there was also in-migration from Mexico and other southern places, especially in more recent years, as we've talked about a little bit in previous, when we talked about like the ladder of assimilation when we talked about race, more and more people are coming in, not just from Mexico nowadays, but El Salvador and Nicaragua and places like that. In fact, nowadays they're talking about the Darien Gap, this migration trail through Panama, and Chinese people and stuff are even coming in that way nowadays, Russians. Anyway, but the population growth then is mainly to non-white people. And so how has LA's demography changed? I don't know if I need to read all these, well, I'll just read this to you. So in 1980, LA had 11 million people. 7 million of those were Anglo people or white. 4 million were non-white. So you can see that back in 1980, it was a clear majority of white people. 7 million of the 11 were white. 4 million of the 11 were non-white, and that 4 million is broken down into Asians and Latinos and Blacks. In fact, out of that 4 million, 2.8 million were Latinos. So 3/4 of that 4 million are Latino people. Well, 570,000 were Asians. And very few, and not that many Black people. Today, though, and this report was written a little while back now, but nowadays there's like 16 million people in LA, and 7 million are Anglos. So you see 7 million white people, it's the same as it was in 1980. But now you have 16 million people before you had 11. So that means there's 5 million at least new people that aren't Anglo. So out of that 16 million people, 6.5 million are Latinos now. So you can say that Latino people are now basically the same number as Anglos. And 1.8 million are Asians. So they more than tripled. They were 570,000, now there's 2 million Asians. And the number of Black people basically stayed the same that time too. So white people and Black people stayed basically the same, but you had a big, huge growth in Latino and Asian people in that area. And that's changed the area in a lot of ways. One thing you see in LA, excuse me, are ethnic enclaves. Every American city basically has ethnic enclaves. Enclaves means like just that group, basically. Like a ghetto is another term we could use for it. But like Chinatown is an ethnic enclave, and LA has always had a Chinatown since, the 1800s. But nowadays they have things like Thai Town and Little Saigon and other areas that are, mainly Vietnamese people in Little Saigon, mainly Thai people in Thai Town. You have Koreatown in LA. So this is a new issue for LA in the sense that you have all these new ethnic groups, but in a lot of cases they're kind of self-segregating into their own neighborhoods, their own towns with their own food. And there's parts of LA where all the signs are in Chinese, or all the signs are in Korean. And that might not be a bad thing, except that then you have ethnic conflict in the town over whose interests will prevail. Instead of everybody seeing themselves as, American Angelenos is the term people like to use in LA. meaning we're all in Los Angeles, we're all Angelenos, but if they're putting their ethnic identity first, then you get problems like LA has had with like, ethnic riots, like happened around Rodney King and stuff like that. And in that case, you had a lot of black people feeling like the Asian store owners were discriminating against black customers. And so when black people, when the riots happened, sometimes businesses were targeted. And sometimes the people owning the businesses were defending them and, just shooting any black person they saw. So it became, ethnic conflict. Anyway, so that's a big change that's happened. Another change relates back to things we were just talking about before we got into cities, and I'll talk about those too. But another one is economic restructuring. LA, like the rest of the country. So economic restructuring is a term you should know already. We learned about it when we talked about the shift from manufacturing and factories to the more service-based economy. And LA had its particular industries. For example, it used to have car industry and the aerospace and military. But LA kind of got hit with a triple whammy in the 1980s. For one thing, the Cold War ended. So we used to have this Cold War with the Soviet Union, and that was one reason that America was building a lot of nuclear weapons and missiles, because we were, trying to scare Russia, Soviet Union, from trying to bomb us. And a lot of those bombs and missiles were built in LA. When I say aerospace, I mean, missiles and nuclear weapons and stuff like that. And those are very high-paying jobs with lots of people being employed in very skilled things. But once the Cold War ended, a lot of those contracts, the federal government wasn't buying missiles and nuclear weapons anymore. And so a lot of those companies went out of business or closed their factories. That was one of the whammies. It also meant that the US military started closing its military bases. LA has many naval bases and marine stations and other kinds of military facilities, but now that the US wasn't, gearing up to fight the Soviet Union or scare them, we closed a lot of those bases. And the car industry, not just building cars, which took place more in Detroit, but there were some car factories in LA, but other kinds of components of cars like tires and other things like that. That began to go away in LA. And so what has it been replaced by? It's been replaced by, low-wage service jobs. So LA lost a big part of its blue-collar middle-class workforce, those good jobs that are hard work, but that pay well. And what they get replaced by is things like working at Home Depot, or people selling oranges on the, freeway median, or, things like that. I mean, just low-level service jobs that don't pay very well. And that has also pertains to housing, changes in housing patterns. Now, during the period of suburban growth, what LA mainly did was grow what are called single-family homes. So we can say too many single-family dwellings and not enough multi-family units. In other words, homes to buy were built, but not apartments to rent. And so I'll just give you some figures around that. So during 1980s, that 10-year period from 1980 to 1990, LA built 1 million new homes. That's a lot of homes in 10 years for one city. in the 1990s, the next 10 years, it only added 400,000 homes. And if we ask, well, what didn't get built? What wasn't 600,000 fewer things got built? What were they? They were the multifamily units. So only thing that got built in the 90s were like what we can call McMansions, is what people call them, meaning, you know, big, very big homes, not like the single family homes that were built in the post-World War II period that I mentioned, the small 2-bedroom homes with the detached garage, but now big, huge homes with multiple dwellings, with no yard and stuff like that. And big, huge garage. You can fit like 3 cars in and stuff like that. And so that means that, what does that mean? It means that rents are high in LA because there's not enough rental units. And I would have thought when the housing crisis happened in 2008, the housing prices crashed. And you would have thought rent prices went down too. I would have. But actually rent went up. Because now that you have all these people foreclosed on their homes, not living in single family homes, they needed to rent too. And a lot of homes for a while there, I don't know if you remember back in 2008, 2009, 2010, a lot of single family homes were just sitting there vacant. And even sometimes people would just go squat in them, and just like go find one and go live in it. Or go in there and take all the copper out of it or something like that, or all the electronics. And it was bad, like whole neighborhoods were just sitting there vacant. Meanwhile, people were like scrambling to try and find something to rent. And so those homes didn't get easily converted into rentals because once they were foreclosed, the banks wanted to sell them again. They didn't want to rent them to anybody. So these homes were just sitting there. Anyway, so what does that mean for LA? It means a lot of people do things that are questionable when it comes to housing. Well, for one thing, economically, what is well, we'll get to this. I guess I don't want to get ahead of myself. But if people's rents go up, a lot of weird things happen. For one thing, people try to live too many people at once in a house to save on rent. And that can be bad for their health. It can be bad for the health of the neighborhood. If you have 20 people living in a house that's only for 5 people, like the sewer won't work correctly, and water things don't work correctly. They're not built to house that many people. But when you've got poor working people in LA trying to find housing, sometimes guys will do that, especially immigrant guys. There was a case, as I read about, of like 20 guys sharing a house. 10 guys slept there during the day, and 10 guys were working during the day. Then those 10 guys woke up at night and went out and worked all night in the service jobs, and the other 10 guys slept there that night. So you had 20 guys sharing an apartment, basically. And that's not healthy for the neighborhood. It's not healthy for them. If people aren't sharing housing, what they're doing is spending way too much of their income on housing. Most social scientists will tell you, and economic people, you should only spend 1/3 of your income on housing. And then you should spend 1/3 on food. And you should spend 1/3 on everything else. But if your rent is, $2,000 a month and stuff like that, then people are spending like 50, 60, 70% of their income just on rent. And that means they don't have enough money for the other things like feeding their kids right, taking care of themselves and their mental health. And so it just creates a whole string of problems when housing is so hard to get. And a big problem is homelessness, obviously, that we have in California and Southern California particularly. There's also been changes in education. As these new immigrants have come in, where do they live? They have to live where the apartments are. The sprawl means that the newest, freshest areas that are furthest away, that's where all the housing is, but the apartments are where the old LA was. So in this 5-county sprawled area, old LA County is where a lot of apartments are. But that's also where things are old. And we talked about schools the other day, we were talking about education. And if the school building is old, then you've got problems that you don't have if your school building's new. And so what basically you have is, the youngest youngest Angelenos are also the poorest. I don't want to write all this down, but what I'm trying to explain is, so you got these immigrants coming in, where can they live? They have to live where the apartments are. That tends to be downtown LA or the old LA County. They don't live way out in Orange County or Santa Clarita County. They're living, Santa Clarita Valley. They're living there. And what schools do you have there? Well, you've got the oldest schools in LA, old school buildings. And as we talked about earlier, you only have so much funding to work with if you're the school. And if you've got an old building, you've got sewer problems and tile problems and HVAC problems, and you're spending all your money just on the building. And the kids are sitting there in a substandard building and they're not getting teachers funded and computers funded. Meanwhile, way out in the Orange County, in the fresh new areas, they have brand new schools filled with brand new computers, and yet, ironically, they don't have enough students. Because that's not where the new Angelenos are coming from. The new Angelenos are the poor immigrant, brown people. And rich white people, their kids long ago graduated from high school and stuff like that. So you've got underpopulated schools that are fresh and new, out in the edges, and you've got crumbling old poor schools where most of the new kids are having to go. And so that's a problem, or that's a situation caused by the sprawl hitting the wall. And I could also mention Proposition 13. We talked about that earlier. Why did California go from being the state that spends the most on its kids for education to being the state that spends the least? Prop 13 that cut property taxes did that. And that means these poorer, older parts of LA can't raise taxes to try and get more money for their schools because Prop 13 makes it really hard to do that. And so meanwhile, the richest people who don't have kids in school sit in big McMansions out in the suburbs with empty schools out there, and the poor people live in the downtown area, LA, with overcrowded schools, overcrowded apartments, and all of that. So those are some of the issues that they're facing. This also means that you then have what are called governance problems. Or I'll just call it changes in governance right now. I haven't really gotten to the problems yet, but I keep mentioning them. But the changes in governance, like I said, if you have 200 separate cookies, each one can govern itself. But when they're all stuck together, it becomes unclear, like whose job is it to do what? For example, a big problem in LA that we're about to talk about is traffic. If you've got too many cars on the road and people having to travel too far to get from one thing to the other, like if you live in downtown LA, but your good new job is way out in Santa Clarita, then you're driving long distances to go where you want to go. And if you have too many cars on the road, you get problems. Like I said, too much traffic. Another one we're going to talk about is too much smog. But then if the smog is happening in your city, but it's because people are driving from downtown LA to come to Glendale, and now we have smog in Glendale, well, who caused the smog problem? Is it Glendale? We were just sitting here and you guys came to work here. Or is it LA? Because it's you people driving over here with your cars. So when we try to figure out which government should be responsible for fixing the smog problem, should it be the Glendale government or should it be the downtown LA government? They just fight over it. And so that's an example of changes in governance. But it also means that governments are kind of underfunded. Because of Prop 13 and other tax cuts, it's not that easy for cities to raise the funds they need to do the things they want to do. And so you have like have and have not cities in LA. Some cities do really well in LA, like Santa Monica is by the coast. They have a nice pier. They have a nice 3rd Street shopping area. So people come from miles around to go to Santa Monica and spend their money in Santa Monica. And so the city of Santa Monica, cities get a lot of their money from sales tax. That's one of the main sources. And so if you can attract a lot of tourism, you can make money. But if you're like Long Beach, was a city that used to be a military town, a Navy town, and the Navy up and left because the Cold War was over. Well, now you got a kind of cruddy little town that never was very nice for families. Navy towns, for one thing, attract what? Well, things like tattoo shops, strip clubs, things that sailors want to spend their money on, but not the things that, wholesome families want to spend their money on. So Long Beach is in a city that's able to attract the kind of tourists to Long Beach that Santa Monica can. And so Long Beach doesn't have enough money for its needs. Santa Monica maybe has too much. And again, you have struggles within the city. You say, well, your tourists come and they come through Long Beach and we have costs associated with that. But you guys are getting all the money from it. So, you should kick down to help us. So, they have fights over stuff like that. And we have that up here too. One thing that's happened in Marysville used to be very much a have-not city with nothing really, and very depressed in a lot of ways. What it has now is the Yuba Water Agency, interestingly enough, and the Yuba Water Agency is making millions and millions of dollars a year selling water around the state, including to Southern California. And with all that money, they can build some new things. So some new things have been coming to the Marysville area and some new development, and you may see Yuba County become more of a have kind of place than it used to be. But anyway, so I haven't gotten to the problems enough. But the problems, let's talk about the problems. So problems associated with sprawl hitting the wall. There's a rising number of working poor people. Working poor is a good term that you need to know if you took a sociology class. What does it mean to be working poor? Working poor means you work full time, but fall below the poverty line. The federal poverty line. What's the federal poverty line? So the federal government in the 1960s began to say, because of the social safety net that we talked about, we need to help certain people. We have a social safety net, but we have to decide who deserves help and who doesn't. And the idea is if you're poor, if you fall into the category of poor, then you should get help from the government. If you're not poor, then you don't need help. But what does poor mean? How do you what's the definition of poor? The federal government had to come up with some definition of what's poor. Well, we said just a second ago that it's healthy to spend 1/3 of your income on housing, 1/3 on food, and 1/3 on everything else. So poverty, the federal government decided was, well, the way we can figure out poverty is to say, what is it cost to feed a family of 4? For a year. So they said, let's figure out what does it cost to feed a family of 4 for a year, and then we'll times that by 3. Because you have to feed your family, and then to be a healthy family economically, you should have 3 times that amount coming in. And so 3 times the family food budget is the poverty line. If you make more than that, then the federal government says you're not poor. If you make less than that, you are poor. But what is a family food budget? Many people point out this policy is what's called arbitrary. Meaning it's kind of random what the food budget is. Why is it random? Well, for one thing, it depends where you live. I mean, if you live in, Los Angeles or certain neighborhoods of Los Angeles, your food budget's going to have to be bigger than it is. Like I sometimes go to Santa Barbara where my family lives. I'm always appalled. This prices in the supermarket there are much higher than the prices here. And, you know, or if you shop at the Nugget versus shopping at Save Mart, I mean, you're gonna see differences. And it also depends on what you consider food. I mean, the federal government had to sit down and just come up with a figure. What is a family food budget? But people differ. Like, you know, if you eat rice and beans every day, you might have a certain cost. If you eat steak all the time, you're gonna have a different one. So what is, you know, what's the family food budget? And nowadays, you know, what is the federal poverty line? Do you know about what it is? What do they say? I actually don't know exactly right now what it is. But for a long time, it was right around, it's about $27,000 for a family of four. They say if you make below $27,000 and you have a family of four, then you are poor. If you make above that, then you're not poor. Could you manage a family of four on 27? I think they say for an individual, it's like 16K. Can you live on 16K and feel totally like you're not poor? I mean, how much is rent? If you're paying $1,500 rent, that's $16,000 right there. So you won't have any money for food. And I would say you're pretty poor if you don't have money. But I mean, if you're paying $16,000 in rent, then don't you need considerably more than 16,000? I mean, if you had 16,001, then you're not poor. I mean, that's why we say it's arbitrary. It's like, that's a figure, but is it really accurate to say that if I make more than that, $1 more than that, then I'm fine? So it's an arbitrary thing to begin with, and it's especially problematic when you're talking about Southern California, where rents are much higher. If you were in Iowa or some like Ames, Iowa, and you're making $27,000, maybe you're doing okay. But if you're in Southern California in LA and you're making 27, you're not doing okay. So working poor are people who work full time, but they still fall below this line. And that's why, you know, a lot of people recently have been saying, let's raise the minimum wage, let's raise how much we pay people in fast food. Because if you think about it, if you make $15 an hour, I can't do the math right now, but $15 an hour doesn't put you above 16,000K. You'll be working full time and you will qualify for federal poverty benefits. In fact, the Walmart used to say to its workers, we don't give benefits at Walmart, like health benefits, but the federal government does, and we pay you so little that you can go apply for federal benefits. And I've always thought Walmart was so like shady for doing that. Like, if you care about your employees, then give them a pension plan and a health plan and things like that. But they're a company that politically says, we don't believe in welfare. We don't think the government should have welfare. So politically, they don't want to pay taxes to support welfare, but as a business, they force their workers to go on welfare. So I've never liked Walmart for that. But anyway, so rising number of working poor people. A bigger issue though, another issue though, but I want to make sure we understand what working poor is, because this issue is not just LA, it's all over the country. And that's one reason we have so much homelessness is the housing costs are out of whack compared to people's incomes. And that's why the inflation has been such a concern for people. But another issue that I really want to make sure we get to, because it ties in more with environmental issues, is so what we have is a job skills mismatch in LA. And you have a housing worker mismatch. So there are some new jobs in LA that pay better than minimum wage. They're good high-tech jobs. And that's what we were told when we restructured the economy is, yeah, you won't be able to work in a car factory anymore, but you could work in like a microchip factory making computer parts and stuff like that. And there are jobs like that in LA, but they tend to be out in, and by the way, this is a term I should have talked about, edge cities. So like I said, LA began in downtown LA. That's the core of the sprawl. It's like if you were looking at a map, downtown LA is the middle, and all the sprawl is on the outskirts of that. And people, so the housing where people live is mismatched from where the jobs are. And the guys that want, so imagine this, you're a young Mexican guy with a young family, recent immigrant. You want a job that pays $30 an hour out making microchips, but the housing you can afford, the apartment your family can afford is in downtown LA, but the chip job, the chip factory job's way down in Santa Clarita Valley, which is 20 miles out of town. That's a mismatch between where the people are that want those jobs and where they can live versus where the jobs are. And they haven't built single family, they haven't built multifamily units out in Santa Clarita Valley and Ventura County and these other nice places. So people have to go rent in the older parts and their kids go to school in those older parts, but they work out in the newer parts. What you have, and so what's happened in some of these older downtown areas is what's called urban blight. Urban blight leads to edge cities. So what I'm trying to get at here is these older parts of town start crumbling. Their infrastructure falls apart. Like I said, if you have 20 guys living per house, the sewage goes bad, you get sewer backups. The schools that we talked about, they have sewer problems and HVAC problems. And when people are struggling that way, sometimes other problems crop up, like graffiti and crime and other things happen when you have a crumbling older city. That means that, and this has happened all around the United States. The older parts of the city have gotten kind of unlivable. And originally, rich companies would put their headquarters in the downtown areas. So if you talk about why do downtowns all have the tall buildings? Well, that's where the rich companies wanted to build their office buildings and their headquarters. And that's where they do their business, that's where their main employees are, and that's where they do deals. So like when people come from all over the world to come do a deal with a businessman in LA, he wants to be able to have, show them his nice new building, take them out to eat in the nice areas and, make a deal with the guy. But if that guy has to step over 20 homeless people to get to your office building, and if he has to see all this poverty and see people begging and stuff like that, and it smells bad, then he's not going to want to do the deal with you. He's going to get back to his hotel and go back home and say, I don't want to do this deal. So what have a lot of these big companies done? They've moved out to the suburbs where the working people are. So the old idea used to be, and I guess what I'm talking about is changing transportation issues. It used to be the commute went from the suburbs to the downtown areas. In other words, people woke up in their bedroom communities, they were called, like the suburbs, and they would get in their car and drive to the city to go work. You can think of Edgewater, the community around, not just Edgewater, but the older community around it's Linda, the neighborhood around Yuba College. Those at one time, if you came here 50 years ago, I think those were pretty, or 100, not 100 years ago, 50 years ago, those were nice houses, a nice little suburb. I think this area was built with the idea that people might live in Marysville, but work in Sacramento. But as these downtown areas have started to crumble because of infrastructure problems and population problems, the headquarters have started to move out to where the suburbs are. So you get what are called edge cities. In LA, it's places like Santa Clarita and Glendale. That's where the big high-tech companies or Irvine is an even better example. Irvine's in Orange County. It used to all be just orange groves, a sleepy little orange grove town. Now if you go to Irvine, it's got the brand new buildings. Big, tall buildings, lots of development of rich companies. And nowadays the commute actually goes not from Orange County to LA every morning, which it used to do. Now people are leaving LA every morning to go work in Orange County. And it's those poor immigrant families that are leaving the older city to go work out. And so the edge cities have this is one of the reasons we have sprawl, and I'm an example of it. I mean, I live in Rockland. Rockland is an edge city. It used to be just a sleepy little town, and now it's got corporate entities there and growth, and I commute a long way to come work here. And so I'm being a bit of a hypocrite. Another example, so edge cities mean that in areas, in megalopolises like this one, Sacramento or LA, the core areas are where a lot of people live, but the outer edges are where work is and shopping. Cities, by the way, build a lot of big box stores nowadays as a way to make money. Big box stores, like I said, sales tax is the way you make money. And if you can build big box stores, then people from all over will come to your big box store. And so your city can make money from people that don't live in your city because they're coming to shop at your Costco or your Walmart or whatever it might be. And so if you think about your own lifestyle, how far do you drive to get to work if you go to work? How far do you drive to go have fun? Or to go shopping? Do you ever get in your car and drive all the way out to Sacramento to go do stuff? Or even just around here, I think a lot of people might live in Marysville, but maybe you do a lot of your shopping in Yuba City. There's a lot of big box stores on the outskirts of Yuba City, and they're starting to have some here at Costco finally down here. But Marysville for a long time was kind of dead in terms of economic activity. Where could I go shop? Where could I go have fun? And so you might live here because the rent was affordable, but you might go far away to go do these other things. So if you ask about your own carbon footprint, how many miles do you travel a day? And by the way, vehicle miles traveled, VMT, is how we can measure these things. And LA's population doubled, like I said, since 1980, but the vehicle mile traveled is way higher than that, more than doubled, like tripled or quadrupled. So in other words, if you take the total number of miles people travel in LA, it's gotten much bigger than it used to be, and it's not just because there's more people. It's because people that are there are driving much more. And you could ask yourself, how many miles do you drive a year? What are they for? And if you had a choice, would you rather do things more closely to home, or be able to walk to things if you could, or ride a bike and stuff like that? But like we said, you guys, a lot of you drove here rather than walk the bike. And so these problems like, mismatches between where people work and where they live, or where the good housing is versus what they can afford, those are all things that affect, your carbon footprint. And so LA's got a lot of problems. I haven't really gotten to those yet. But a big problem is, traffic congestion. You don't have public transportation, everybody has cars, everybody's traveling far distances to do the things they need to do. And that means you have roads too filled up with cars. That was one of the big reasons I wanted to not live in LA. Like every time you try to go someplace, it's only like 2 miles away and it takes like half an hour. And a lot of times you're like, I could just get out and walk quicker than I'm sitting here in my car. But it would be a pretty long walk. And so anyway, and all that traffic congestion means a lot of smog and air pollution. And I want to talk a little bit about that issue. So LA is interesting in that geographically it's like a bowl. And so smog problems, there's health problems associated with smog. Smog is pretty much a word invented in LA, but it's the mixture of smoke and fog, water droplets in the air, and particulate matter in the air from, dust and not dust, but exhaust, carbon particles and all that stuff. And when they all bind together, you get this stuff called smog. LA used to be the smog capital of the world. more smog than ever, than anywhere else. It's no longer the smog capital of the world, which is good news for LA, but let's think that through. Why is that the case? When I was a kid, they used to have these things called smog alerts, where they would even close schools because the smog was so bad that if kids were outside playing and you breathed the smog, it would damage your lungs and you could feel it. Like at the end of the day, if you breathe, it would hurt your chest. And I remember this feeling, and they're like, don't even play outside on these high smog days, and we're even gonna close the schools. Well, nowadays, there's many fewer of those smog alert days than there used to be, even though there's many more cars on the road than there used to be. So why would that be? What do you think, using your critical thinking and what you might know about California and its laws, why would it be that we have more cars on the road but less smog than we used to?
Your car has to pass smog for you.
You have to get a smog check. You have to have a catalytic converter on your engine so that you're not producing so much smog, so much carbon monoxide and things like that. And so California did pass this law to clean up its air. And California's air did get a lot cleaner than it used to be. And so when people say, oh, government can't do anything and I don't like regulations, well, nowadays, I'm very happy my chest doesn't hurt and my kids' chests don't hurt when we breathe the air here. But so the air got cleaner, but the locus of smog changed. I want to talk a little bit about that. So LA is a bowl, and all these cars traveling meant that all this, when people used to travel into LA from the suburbs, that meant the smog would gather all over LA, downtown LA. And LA is like a bowl geographically. So the way smog works is it rises into the air, and then during the hot day, and then as the air cools at night, that air gets denser and it all settles back down into the ground. And if you're in a bowl, that means like all night long, you're basically sleeping in concentrated smog that is now gathering in the bowl. And who lives in the bowl? The downtown poor part of LA. Poor immigrant people. So when we start looking at, well, what are the problems caused by smog? Throat cancer and lung cancer and emphysema, things that we know are related to breathing carbon monoxide all night long. When we look at the distribution of these problems, which Angelenos have throat cancer, have lung cancer, it was falling very heavily on poor brown people who lived in the bowl. If you think of LA, all the rich areas are kind of high ground. In fact, it's reflected in the names. Beverly Hills, Palos Verdes Estates, Green Hills Estates in Spanish, Baldwin Heights, all kinds of heights and hills, and so rich people like to live in the hills, and poor people get left in the flatlands. And so in LA, that meant the smog mostly gathered there, and lots of people were getting sick from that. Rich people, meanwhile, didn't see their kids having asthma and them getting throat cancer. And so when rich people were told, we have a smog problem in LA, and we got too many cars on the road causing smog, they're like, what are you talking about? It's fine. People in LA began saying, we should put back public transportation. We need these poor people, and working people need more ways to get around than just cars. And the rich people said, nah, you're going to tear up the roads to build subways? Nah, that would harm my commute. I want to be able to drive my Mercedes. And, if you're going to tear up the roads, I won't be able to do that. So it was the rich elites of LA for a long time tried to stop. So the red car now doesn't exist, but they do have the metro in LA. And the metro is supposed to replace the red car. But the red car, by the way, was replaced by freeways. And the freeways are still there. And that means that if you're trying to rebuild public transportation, where do you put the tracks? Because the old tracks, the red car, were good. They went from where people were and wanted to go. For example, one place people want to go is to the beach. So being able to travel from downtown LA on a red car, a streetcar, to the beach to take your family to the beach and then get back on the red car and go home, that used to be possible. When LA was trying to build the metro, they said, well, we want to be able to recreate what the red car did, but we can't do it because there's freeways blocking what we're trying to do. So they built where they could build, And that meant it wasn't really good routes. In other words, so when they first built the metro, no one was really using it. Because, yeah, you had tracks going from point A to point B, but point A wasn't where anybody was, and point B wasn't where anyone wanted to go. So it wasn't really doing the job of meeting people's transportation needs. They've tried to fix it, and one of the big things they said is we need a mid-Wilshire line. Wilshire is a major street, Wilshire Boulevard through LA, and it connects like East LA. East LA is where a lot of working poor immigrant people live, Latino people. Where do they work? A lot of them work as nannies and landscapers and custodial people in West LA. West LA is where the rich people, Hollywood people live. And so a classic story we used to hear about in LA would be a woman who works taking care of white people's children. In fact, there was a movie called Spanglish, where the white kids knew more Spanish than English because their nanny was Mexican and teaching the kids. And so the classic story would be, she wakes up at like 4 in the morning in East LA because she's got a long commute. She's got to takes her 2 hours to get to Beverly Hills to go take care of the Juarez children. Sorry, that word. But go take care of her children. And meanwhile, her children woke up without their mom at home and had to fix themselves breakfast. She had to get to Beverly Hills to make them breakfast and help them with their homework. Her kids woke up without a mom at home, made their own breakfast, didn't get help with their homework. She had a 2-hour commute back to East LA. And what would really help her would be a subway train that went from East LA to West LA. But when they were trying to build that, the Mid-Wilshire line, it was the rich elites of West LA saying, we don't want you to build that because you're going to tear up Wilshire Boulevard, and then when I'm trying to drive my Mercedes to downtown LA, it's going to take forever. So no, I don't want you to do that. And so for years they fought it, even though poor women and men on the east side of town would have benefited strongly from that. And so finally they gave in, and now they are building the Mid-Wilshire line, and that will help make the metro actually do what it's supposed to do, which is carry people where they need to go. But I'm just trying to show you some of the conflicts that cities have over, like we were talking about the other day. Should you build a baseball stadium or should you build schools? And that battle's happening right now in Sacramento. Well, all this traveling by car and means also that people are, their carbon footprints are up. And what we need to talk about that I didn't talk about. So if you come on Tuesday, I hope you will. I'm going to have more to say a little bit, and then we'll review. But the key to fixing all this and what we're trying to do in Sacramento is what's called smart growth. Trying to be much more thoughtful about how we plan our cities so that we have more public transportation, more housing options, more ways for people to live walkable lifestyles so that you can wake up and walk to work and walk to or ride a bike so that you're having less of a carbon footprint, so that we can maintain our farmland and our clean air and our waterways. So as we look out over the Sacramento Valley now, it's not yet like the Los Angeles valleys that are filled up with development. And sociologists like me would say, it would be smart if we could keep it that way and try to make sure that going forward, we're thoughtful about where we put people and try to keep people close to transportation, not spread things out so that people have to have cars, and try to maintain wetlands, farmland, forest land. But that's a big battle that this country's still having, and the whole world's having. The Amazon rainforest is another place that if we tear up the whole Amazon rainforest, the world's global warming will get even worse, and the air will get worse because those trees breathe in a lot of that and breathe out a lot of oxygen for planet Earth. But there's a lot of poor Brazilians that see economic opportunity in mining all that land and cutting down the trees. And so there's a big battle between people that want to mine the Amazon rainforest and people that want to preserve it and protect it. And so anyway, we'll see you on Tuesday, and we'll say a little bit more about smart growth, and then we'll review for the exam.
Bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed the class. I don't know if you learned anything, but I hope you did.
We don't have a study after this exam, do we?
It should be,
It is?
if you look in files, I will post, again, an announcement about how we're going to do things the next couple of weeks. And I will make sure you have your study guide and all of that.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, take care. So,
If we do the extra credit, how long would you want to?
oh, like a page.
Okay.
And you could do the 2 movies you're talking about, yeah, either one of them, if you just show that you can connect what the movie's about to what we talked about in the class, and maybe use a term or two from the class, then, yeah. And try to turn it in, anytime before the end of the term.
Do you want it on paper or like an email?
It can be emailed.
Thank you.
Thank you, take care.